Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Zone Star State podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is Ishmael Johnson on this Monday, March 31st. Ish, how are you doing today?
Doing good, doing good. Kind of now with the come down of the week of men's college basketball. Obviously, we still have one more game for our purposes on the women's side, but it's been great. It was a great weekend, I think, overall of basketball.
It was obviously with the women and the men's both having their Sweet 16 and Elite Eight, and also as we're recording this, Texas versus TCU is Monday night. We're recording this Monday morning, so we'll do another podcast on Tuesday to recap that. We'll give a little bit of our thoughts here for those who can listen on a Monday. But I think we should start with Houston making the Final Four. The Houston men have advanced to the Final Four, and they did so beating Purdue on Friday night and then beating Tennessee on Sunday night. And the Purdue game was fascinating because obviously it ended incredibly. If we want to just start there with the way that Purdue hits a three with, I think it was 30 seconds left. Houston gets a shot up. I believe it was Uzan turns around, shoots a fadeaway, misses it. They get the offensive rebound because it's tipped out of bounds by Purdue to an underneath out of bounds. And because they were reviewing it, Houston had time to draw up a play. And they draw up, or Kelvin Sampson draws up an excellent baseline out of bounds that some people, which I understand, were like, well, if Braden Smith just doesn't leave the ball, then, that's not open. But at the same time, then LJ Cryer is open on the curl on the baseline. So it was like the options were there no matter what. And no matter how you slice it, Houston throws it in, gets it back to it was Uzan, right, who put it in at the end?
Yeah, it was Uzan to Tugler, then back to Uzan.
Yeah, back to Uzan. Uzan finishes it, wins the game, beats Purdue 62-60 in Lucas Oil Stadium, so a road game there. And then they come back on Sunday and just beat the brakes off of Tennessee. I mean, it was 34-15 at halftime. Just a vintage Houston performance there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it can be underestimated how tough this run was, or this path was for Houston, right? I think we talked about, and of course I talked about because I picked them in my Final Four, was the Gonzaga in the second round, right? By all metrics, a top 10 team in the country. Resume wise, didn't live up to that, so therefore they get slotted at the 10. What was I going to say? Then getting Purdue in this game, right, in this round. Purdue, I think this isn't last year's Purdue, obviously, that made the national championship game, but I think one of the things that we did not, or at least I completely underestimated, was the shot making ability of this Purdue team and their ability to make Houston a little bit uncomfortable, particularly, I mean, I think Braden Smith played one of the best games in the entire tournament, if I'm being honest. I believe, let me see if I have his numbers right here. 15 assists, 7 points. I think he assisted on, let's see. Oh my God. I mean, 15 assists first overall is crazy. I believe he, let's see, 2 of 7, 15 assists, 7 points total. So he hit that big three, I think, late. To tie it, I think it was that corner. I think that was the corner three. That was him. And then of course people are going to look at the final play. So yeah, 50. So they made 21 shots and he assisted on 15 of them, right? Purdue did. And that made Houston have to kind of hit a new gear, or a different gear that I think from what we've seen so far. And then of course late, I mean, how do you guard that? You can't guard that out of bounds play. Yeah. You mentioned, I think they noticed that there was a really good breakdown of this on Twitter. I forgot who did it. I apologize, but Houston's run that out of bounds set a couple times, and multiple times they've left the inbounder, right? And so I think it was because they see Cryer go into the corner and that's the first read. And I think Kelvin Sampson basically said that was the first read. Or I don't know. I don't think I think he said they had a first read that was taken away. So people presume that it was Cryer going to the wing. And Houston just added that wrinkle at the very last minute, right? I think it was that people had successfully guarded that baseline play, cut off Cryer, and they just completely forget about the inbounder. And I think that's natural for a bunch of teams, right? It's like if you a lot of teams in general are just not worrying about the inbounder.
Yeah.
And in this case, a lot of teams don't add that little wrinkle of just flaring him to the basket and literally right at the dunker spot, boom, Tugler hits the perfect pass, perfect give, almost like a give and go, basically,
Hmm.
how it ends up designed. But yeah, I mean, an incredible play, probably one of the best plays you'll see drawn up like that, executed to perfection. Because yeah, if Smith doesn't go to Crier's wide open for either an open three or a pull up or whatever, and it kind of left the another man. I forgot. I think it was Crier's man who ended up being in no man's land because he got screened off,
He got
and then
screened.
eventually, yeah,
Yeah.
and so he was caught in no man's land basically, and he was basically guarding no one. So like it was incredible.
Yeah, so like you said, on this run, Houston will have or has beaten the number 9 team in Ken
Yeah,
Palm, the number 15 team in Ken Palm, and then the number 5 team. And now they have the number 1 seed up next, which we'll preview Houston Duke on our next podcast, and
yeah.
along with all the Final Four games. That's already just going to be an incredible matchup. But I didn't get eyes on the Tennessee game.
Mhm.
But it didn't seem like I needed to. Every time I checked the score, just like Tennessee was still at 12, 12, 12, 15, and Houston just kept
Yeah.
going. So a dominant performance there. I don't know if you have anything to add to it, but holding
I
Tennessee to 5 of 29 from 3.
Yeah,
Just
like it became clear that Tennessee, and I think it was Gary Parrish that mentioned this on the CBS, where he like it became clear that to beat Houston and probably to beat any of these Final Four teams, you need kind of upper caliber NBA caliber talent, right? And when it became obvious that Zakai Ziegler just wasn't physically up to that, um, it was going to be a rough night for Tennessee because they needed to have a massive game from Zakai Ziegler, from Chance Lanier. Like they needed those guys to be on their best game. And again, physically, Zakai Ziegler's a smaller guard, right? He's a
very
very,
small.
very, very, very both in size and just weight too. He's like under 180, and like the fact that Houston was able to throw so many different looks, make him uncomfortable, not let him get in the paint basically at all on the drive, and they were resorting to outside shots, and you saw the recipe on the wall. I think it was similarly to if, let's say, Houston would have lost to Purdue or Gonzaga, we would have said that was a tough draw for Houston. I think this region in particular was a tough draw for Tennessee because they basically ran into a team that plays their style just better, right? Like you look at Houston and Tennessee, both incredibly sound defensive teams, but Houston is kind of like the perfect version of Tennessee, where it's like
Yeah.
their guards are more physical, they can shoot better from the outside,
Mhm.
and they play this stifling defense. So it just became like I was watching the game and I was like, man, Tennessee may be a Final Four team in like any other region, not this one, probably not the Duke region, but like I do think this was a big matchup issue that Houston just completely overwhelmed them.
Yeah. So great run from Houston already.
Yeah.
Good to see them back in the Final Four here. Happy for Kelvin Sampson and this team that have just continued to battle. And like we said, since November, they have been one of the best teams in the country in a year where there's 4 teams that are just clearly better than everybody else. And Houston's
Yeah,
one of them.
I'll probably say this again on the preview episode. Matt Norlander mentioned the Final Four teams. He made a case for this being because everybody's talking about, oh, there's no madness, there's no Cinderella teams. He's like, in turn, we've probably gotten the best Final Four we've ever gotten in terms of like these 4
By
teams
far.
being sizably better than the rest of the country. And I think he cited Ken Palm. These are 4 of the teams in the top 10 all time in Ken Palm, right? I think he said Duke was number 6. Houston, no, Duke was number 4 or something.
I think,
Houston's number 6, and then 8 and 10, I think, are Florida and Auburn. And so, like,
yeah.
again, you can talk about there's no Cinderellas, there's no this. Like, if you just want to watch the best teams with star power too, like probably 2 of the best players in the country, probably that are in
Yeah.
Janai Broom and Cooper Flag, going to be the number 1 and number
Hell,
2.
then I got Walter Clayton as the third best team or
I was
third
about
best
to
player
say,
in
and
the
then you have
country.
the third best player probably in the country in Walter Clayton, and then you have just like name your player on Houston, right? You have the defensive player of the year in the Big 12 and JoJo Tugler. You have LJ Cryer's hit a new level. Milos Uzan, who's like become probably their best player over the past month. Like this star power, and like people talk about wanting star power in the men's game, how the women's game is taking over as far as like casual experience. Yep. This is the tournament you should have wanted this whole time, right? This type of game. So we'll talk more about the matchup exactly, but I think we're about to get three classic games if you include the semis and the eventual final.
Yeah. All right, Texas Tech. We got to talk about them but we're going to start with the positive here. That win over Arkansas was absolutely electric.
Yes.
Absolutely electric. They looked outclassed for a large portion of the game. They were down 16 with under 10 minutes left. Yeah. I don't remember exactly where. Oh man, yeah, they were down 13 with 4:43 left in the second half. And I mean, you and I are texting, and I'm just like, they just don't look on the same caliber. Arkansas looks better. Across the board, athletically, coaching, like every aspect of it, and they were hitting threes, right? That was the problem. Arkansas ends the game 10 of 25 from three. I don't know what they were 30 minutes into the game, but it felt like they were like 50%. And you're like, okay, all right, it's not going to happen.
Right. This one's just it felt like one of those moments where if Arkansas is hitting the shots they were hitting, it's like, okay, hey, what are you gonna do at that point? I'll be honest, like I was like very much in that game. Like, you mentioned we were texting. I was like, dude, are we like at this point? This was always a lingering thought in my mind. Was like, and it's the same with Todd Golden of Florida too. You can't make that level. You can't make that jump until you do. Right. In terms of like that level of coach or that level of, making the Final Four, making the Elite Eight, whatever. And like in my mind, it crossed where I was like, hey, is this just Grant's wall for this year? Right. Like, is he just running up against a coach who's been here, done that? And you can't get to that level until you've just done it. And granted, again, Todd Golden's done this with Florida, and we'll talk about that game in a little bit. But there was a little bit of that in my mind where I'm watching this game. I'm like, it wouldn't shock me if just like, hey, he runs up against John Calipari, Arkansas. He's gotten Arkansas to play at this level that they've should have been at probably to start the season. And what are you going to do? Right. You get outplayed, you get, all this stuff. And I don't want to say it was an indictment. I was thinking that it was an indictment on Grant, but I just felt like there was a level to that. I thought that he probably had, couldn't reach at that point. Yeah. Lo and behold, they just come out and I think also Arkansas regressed heavily
thank
back
God.
to the mean.
Yes.
They just absolutely, they kept shooting the same shots that they were shooting and they just weren't making them. And then Texas Tech just said, look, we have probably outside, you look at the 10 deep or the 11 people on the roster, whatever. Arkansas probably has like 9 of the better players.
Yeah, just in terms of
Texas
talent.
Tech has 2 Texas Tech had 2 players that could go into that Arkansas starting lineup and probably many starting lineups across the country. And they just said, win us this game. Darren Williams, win us this game. JT Toppin in overtime. I think Hawkins was the only player, not those 2 in overtime to win that game or to score in that game.
Yeah, he hit that 3.
Yeah, he hit that massive 3 because again, we were frustrated with Elijah Hawkins a lot of this tournament, and particularly in this game.
Yeah.
But Grant, like they buckled down on defense. Obviously, it helped that they weren't hitting the threes at the same level. But then, then they just went to their 2 best players and they said, "Hey, put this team on your back." And Darren Williams, dude, that guy. Look, I hope he comes back. I think he will. He's only a junior. Him and JT Toppin are going to be the best front court in the country next year. Like I'm willing to put that out there right now. I don't think anybody across the country, both ways defensively, and then the versatility on offense. JT Toppin stepped back and hit a 3 pop, which he rarely does, but he showed that range. If you're a Tech fan, you have to have looked at that game and said, as long as Grant McCaslin's here, we're good. We're good.
I mean, I think I think everybody was like fair to be like, all right, this is just kind of the ceiling for this team. And Arkansas was high. Arkansas ends the game 10 of 25 from 3 and 19 of 22 from the free throw line. Like, it's just, well, what the difference was and what helped spark that run, honestly, is something that we've seen from Grant McCassin teams at North Texas. It's like, it's not going to be pretty, but they just find ways to get the ball. Texas Tech ended the game with 22 offensive rebounds. And I think Federico had that stretch, that one possession where he had like 4. Like
I was about to say he was massive in this game too.
he just doesn't lose. And I don't know how it's fair because obviously he can lose and they lost to Florida. But like in these type of games where it feels like, man, I go back to North Texas versus Western Kentucky, and Western Kentucky had Charles Bassey and these guys, and you're like, oh, there's just no way, they're out talented. You find ways to win, and we've seen this now year over year.
Yeah,
He just finds ways to win these games, and the culture he has with this team is so impressive. And so, yeah, Federico, 13 minutes, 7 offensive rebounds. I mean, just like the toughness of the team. Elijah Hawkins to have a really pedestrian game and then step up and hit a 3. I think it was like in semi-transition too, where he kind of pulled up and hit it. And it's just like they just win, man. It's just win.
Yeah.
But I do think like the ceiling, I will say, if we want to transition a little bit to the Florida game, I left that Arkansas game being like, there's no shot Texas Tech beats Florida. In my head, I'm just like, dude, that
with how Florida had looked this season. It was like Florida had entered that stratosphere with Duke and Houston, where they were like, "Ooh, like that." There's 3 teams, and then maybe there's a 4th, which is Auburn, obviously. But yeah.
So I left that game being like, "There's just no shot." But we're just gonna enjoy this win. Texas Tech, awesome, great win. And it ended with Darren Williams backing down and finishing. He is such a strong player that they did a good job getting mismatches, and he just attacked.
Yeah.
So they win the game.
I mean, I don't think to your point on the roster as well. I don't think it can be understated that he scrapped the entire roster, but said Darren Williams, Chance McMillan, and who's Kerwin Walton, I think was the other one that they brought. Yeah. And he was like, everybody else. He's like, the last year's team was not the roster we needed. These 3 guys I can win with. And
they didn't even have McMillan. Didn't even have McMillan for this Arkansas game.
Right. And yeah, like I don't think it can be understated that he looked at that roster and said, and again, I don't think anybody would have really, any casual fan probably looks at last year's roster and he probably, like, if they would have got a replacement for Darren Williams or Chance McMillan, I don't think people would have like been like, oh, how could the, like it wasn't like last year was full of players who were just can't miss and you need to bring them back. Like the fact that he had the faith in those guys in particular, and then Darren Williams to prove that he's, again, for an undersized big, the way he plays, like absolutely stellar. I believe he finished with 20 points along with JT. But yeah, like this team, this is going to be one of the more, I think, this 2-year run, I'm going to say, because with Toppin and Williams kind of carrying over, this 2-year run is going to be potentially very special.
Yeah. So, like I said, I leave the Arkansas game and I'm like, okay, how in the world are they going to get up for Florida? Because the problem with the Arkansas game was I just thought they looked outclassed to a degree, like physically at some spot. Like Elijah Hawkins just was not big enough at times, and he struggled to get a shot off, struggled to see the lanes.
Right.
And then we already know, like, even with Williams, they kind of played, like Christian Anderson played a ton, and that Overton played a ton, and they were like kind of skinnier guys. And I'm like, Florida's coming at you with Martin, Clayton, Richard, like these dudes, and I'm just like, how? Oh, Condon, and then Hall, like all these big dudes, Chinilu, and I didn't think they'd have a chance at physically matching up. I mean, I was just completely wrong on that. Texas Tech was the better team for 38 minutes of this game, man. And they couldn't finish it.
I texted you. I was like, "Hey, I'm going into a movie. Like, we had this movie.
There was like 5 or 6 minutes left in the game.
I was like, oh my god!
I was already calling my friends that went to Texas Tech, and I was like, y'all gonna be in San Antonio? Let's go get your tickets. So they were up like 10. Wait, what was it? They were up 10 with 5:30 left.
Minutes, just under 5 minutes, just over 5 minutes to go. Yeah, and you thought, at least for me, I thought that it was Toppin and Williams carrying over what they had done from the previous game, and then the biggest factor was, I think, and he did this also. After a bad first round game, he did this against Drake. Elijah Hawkins stepping back and saying, like, okay, I'm facilitating, right? Like, I'm not turning the ball over. I'm not taking ill-advised shots. Like, I am just setting people up. And again, that's when he's the best. That's when he's at his best. And then Walter Clayton had the game of his life, the finish to his life. you mentioned there's a reason why he's considered like, in that three of like potential Naismith player of the year. At some point,
Dude's
what do
hitting
you do?
Steph Curry run around to the 3-point line threes on you.
It was
And
nasty.
like I like that's 100% Walter Clayton is become one of my favorite players to watch because he is just that unconscious. He did this against UConn too. Like they couldn't separate from
Mhm,
UConn,
mhm.
and then all of a
Yeah,
sudden Clayton hits like 3 threes, and you're just like, all right, the game's over. Cool.
yeah.
And actually, as I look at it, I said they were, it was a 10-point game and 5:30 left. It was a 9-point game with 3:14 left.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing Texas Tech could have done better, I know Williams had 2 threes late, I think, to tie it or take the lead with like a minute or so left, or less than a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And then JT Toppin, I believe it was, missed the front end of 2 1-and-1s.
Yeah, that
It's
was rough.
basically
I think I was about to say there was 2 1-on-1s. You're right. Yeah,
the front end of 2 1-and-1s. And I think that's basically the equivalent of going 0 for 4 at the free throw line.
yeah.
Like that you have to put it away there.
Yes.
So that's the painful part of this whole thing. And yeah, man, Florida got 27 free throws, 25 of 27 from the free throw line. Texas Tech 7 of 13. Texas Tech still out rebounded them in terms of offensive rebounds, only had 7 turnovers. Texas Tech did a lot of things right. We saw Chance McMillan come back, and he ended the game with 14 points, hit a couple big shots.
Incredible game from him, considering his first game back in a month.
Exactly. And so all that being the case, Texas Tech completely outplayed Florida for, like I said, 37 minutes, and then Walter Clayton just went off. And then I think Thomas Hall hit a 3 as well. He ended the game 4
I
of
was about to say,
6.
I think he finished with 4. I think he finished with
Good Lord.
four threes. But yeah, one in particular in that comeback.
This is an amazing Florida team, like we talked about. All these one seeds are. And Texas Tech went toe to toe with them, and I thought outplayed them. They just couldn't quite close the door. So that's a really painful one for that team.
100%. And like I mentioned Todd Golden a little bit with Graham McCaslin's name, where it was like, was there a ceiling for that type of coach who just hasn't done it yet, right? And I think we saw both the quality of both these coaches, right? Like you mentioned, the physical aspect of Florida not overwhelming this Tech team. In fact, it being the opposite, right? And then late, like Florida being able to hit that last gear in the waning minutes. And you mentioned it was a lot of Clayton, but like Thomas Hall was massive down the stretch, right? Like he was able to stretch the floor and keep the paint a little bit free, right? I think Darren Williams kind of drew the assignment of him. So like having him not be able to help JT in the paint quite a bit and spacing the floor out. And then Clayton just, of course, hitting some NBA shots, which you just can't, you can't do anything about. But yeah, man, it was such a heartbreaking way for that one to end because it wasn't like, of course, you look at the 1-and-1s, but there wasn't much else that you could say that just didn't go their way or like, they blew it or whatever.
It wasn't like bad
just
turnovers or anything like that.
Right.
They just
not at all.
didn't make shots late, and you're like, oh, okay, then Walter.
And then even when Florida tied it up, like they took the like Tech went and took the lead again. Like it wasn't like they just like Florida went on this run and then it was over. Like Tech had counter punches ready. I think it was Darren Williams again who ended up posting up Haw when the game was tied and like immediately got the lead back with just over a minute to go. So it was like it had that back and forth feel, and you're just like, oh my God, is this eventually obviously the bigger shot maker won out, but yeah, it was heartbreaking loss, but an incredible game too. And yeah, I mean, if Tech is here instead of Florida, I don't think anybody's saying like, oh, we missed out on whatever. Like I think we're looking at it saying, dang, that's still a very stacked Final Four.
Yeah, Texas Tech ends the year 9th in Ken Palm. If they had won the game, though, they'd probably be 6 or.
I was about to say, they'd probably be just on the outside of that top 4.
Yeah. So yeah, great run from Texas Tech. Great run from McCaslin in year 2 to do this. We'll see what.
Yeah.
JT Toppin and Darren Williams. I know last I checked, Toppin's draft stock was not that of a first round grade in most places.
Right.
So
yeah, I still think there's something. Yeah, he's a little. I want to say small. He's not small. But like I think his style isn't necessarily conducive right now to a big that you would take pretty high in the draft.
And we can talk about, but like the 3, like he's not a shooter yet. He'd have to really develop in that aspect of it.
Right. He's almost a throwback. He's almost a throwback big to like probably like 10 years ago. He's probably in the lottery.
Yeah,
But the NBA is moving
100%.
so much more to spacing.
100%. I think 10 years ago he's in the lottery.
Yeah.
Yeah, 6'9", kind of a back to the basket guy. A great rebounder, obviously. So we'll see what decisions him and Williams make and everything like that. But great team, great year for Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Let's get some quick thoughts on TCU and Texas Tech's Sweet 16 matchups because both of them were very,
Yep.
very, very interesting. I do want to start real quick with Texas because I watched this game and I was concerned they weren't going to do it. I think I texted you. I said,
Mhm.
Texas, please don't do this. Texas,
Yeah.
please don't lose to Tennessee. Because it's kind of more of the same what we've been watching. It's like Texas just doesn't pull away. They're just not doing it. Tennessee's right there hanging around. And I'm like, if Tennessee hits some of these threes, Texas
Yeah.
is in serious, serious trouble. But Tennessee couldn't hit a 30. They went 5 of 26 for the game and
I
4
was
of
about to say
10 from the
it
free
just
throw line.
never happened.
Yeah, it's like just never happened, which credit to Texas, sure. But I'm just like, if one of these threes from fill in the blank, Spencer or Darby or Spear go in, we're looking at a completely different game here. But it didn't, and Texas continues to just put a stranglehold on teams enough to where they get the win. I thought Taylor Jones was active and good in her 31 minutes. You know, Rory 8 points, Munatonda 5, Booker 17 on 6 of 15 shooting. So it was just a very Texas game. I will say this: my only takeaway from this game, the 2 freshmen are phenomenal, Jordan Lee and Brianna
Yes.
Preston.
Oh my God.
Oh my, they were the saviors.
Yes, 1000%. They needed some scoring outside of Madison Booker and Taylor Jones, really, because as you mentioned, nobody else contributed much offensively. And they were, I mean, Jordan, look, this is the team that doesn't shoot threes, right? They just don't. And that's by design. And Jordan Lee adding that element from the outside when they needed it, right? Like we were saying, like if they just had, if Tennessee hits any of these shots, like it's a different game, and Texas wasn't able to hit that next gear. And what happened? It was Jordan Lee kind of being the one from the outside. And again, I would hope that, again, I know it's a style, but I'm just hoping like, hey, Vic, that'd be nice. Like, you know, if you just have somebody, who can clearly hit at a above average clip, like that'd be great to get her some minutes. I don't know. I love Shea Holly, but maybe she doesn't need to be playing 35 minutes a game. I don't know. But like you said, like they came up massive and they were the ones that end up putting the, you know, how teams put the name on as the bracket advances.
Yeah.
The freshmen were the ones that like they let the freshmen put this one go into the Elite Eight and punch their name. And rightfully so. They needed a spark and something a little bit different on the scouting report. And sure enough, the fact that they were able to, without much playing time this season overall, like come in like this and do this, like, yeah, that's scary.
Yeah. And they've shown flashes.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
this is definitely their best game and the biggest moments. I mean, Preston 5 of 7. Preston is so fast in the open
Yeah,
court.
man.
Like she just moves really well. She had 4 assists as well in this game. So you add that element, like those two can elevate this team to a level that I was questioning, you know, going in is like,
Mhm.
is this really a championship team if it's just Booker, Jones, Harmon, like
Mhm.
if that's it. If Lee
Yeah.
and Preston are good, or at least like they don't even have to be this good, but if they're just capable
Yeah.
rotation players like this, then that adds another element for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, good win from Texas. Scary, as always, but they get it done.
Yeah.
TCU played Notre Dame, and I don't remember. Did we both have Notre Dame winning this game? I had Notre Dame winning this game in my bracket.
I think I hadn't. I think I had Notre Dame win this game. Yes, because I mean
So go
they
ahead.
played earlier in the year, and we mentioned how TCU won that game, but I thought that the talent in the backcourt in particular would overwhelm TCU overall. Right, Haley Van Lith versus Miles, Hidalgo,
Yep.
Citron. Right, it just felt like there was going to be something there. And I'll say this: early on, it kind of was playing out to the stalemate that I thought it was. And I eventually thought that the talent in Notre Dame would be like, if it was a close game early, I was like, dang, I don't like that
Yeah.
because eventually you just thought Miles and Hidalgo were going to get going. And it didn't happen. The person that took over was the one player for TCU that we knew we could count on. But I mean, Haley Van Lith, man, this is we're looking at no joke, like the best basketball season for TCU performance for TCU ever, men's or women's. Like
Yeah,
it's by far now. Like
for
I
sure.
texted you, they need to retire her jersey because they retired Desmond Bane's jersey, a guy who never made the tournament. I think won Big 12 Newcomer of the Year, and granted, fantastic player, not a great roster around him. But like,
No,
if Haley
get
Van
him
Lith
out
is
of
doing
here.
all of,
Move it
I was about
over.
to say,
Burn it. It's Haley Van
no,
Lith,
not,
man.
no one wears number 10. If I'm TCU, no one, men's or women's, wears number 10. What she's doing this year is unheard of, and of course, becoming the first player ever to make the Elite Eight or the Final Four or the
The
Elite
Elite
Eight with
Eight
three
with
different
3 different
teams.
teams. Yeah.
Like, are we serious right now? Like, there hasn't been a year that she's played that they haven't made the Elite Eight for whatever team she's on, right? She was at Louisville for 3 years, LSU, and then this year. Like, they've
Well,
always
yeah.
made the Elite Eight.
Yeah.
And bringing this level of success to TCU, dude, it's no question. It's just the best player to ever wear a Horns Frog jersey.
Haley Van Lith, going into the game, I said Haley Van Lith would not be able to surpass Hidalgo and Miles. Individually,
Right.
Individually, I didn't think she'd be able to reach that level.
Mhm.
Not only did she beat them both individually, she beat them collectively. Like both
She
of
really
them
did.
versus her, it was not even close. Hannah Hidalgo ends the game 3 of 19 from the field. Miles 3 of 10 from the field. And I'm not saying it was like Haley Van Lith's defense or anything like that. It was a team defensive effort for sure.
Mhm.
But if we're just comparing offense to offense numbers here, Haley Van Lith, 26 points, 10 of 21 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3, 4 of 4 from the line, and 9 rebounds with 4 assists as well. And it felt a lot like the Baylor game where the Big 12 championship, where it was like,
Yeah.
oh, Haley Van Lith's just better than everyone else on the court. I didn't think that'd be the case against Notre Dame.
Right.
Like, Baylor's one thing. Okay, no offense to Baylor, but like that's one thing.
Mhm.
Notre Dame is completely different. Like, this is a team that a month ago, before they lost a couple games at the end of the regular season, was like the national title favorite or one of the favorites. And here we are, March 31st, talking about Haley Van Lith was better than everybody else on the court. Hidalgo,
Mhm.
Miles, Citron, everybody else. Nobody could hold a light to Haley Van Lith. And
Yeah.
that's just an incredible, incredible story for Van Lith to make this leap of faith, honestly, to Mark Campbell and entrust him with her last college season. And it has just paid off tenfold. Very, very happy for her and this team for making this run, because that is a phenomenal win. And like you, I thought in the first half it was kind of 50-50. I still leaned kind of Notre Dame just watching it on and off. And then in the second half, I thought defensively, clearly, right, holding Notre Dame to 62 points. Mark Campbell deserves a ton of credit for that. But the Agnes Eminopu, Donovan
Yeah.
Hunter, the Madison Connors, I thought defended well. Sedona Prince, clearly 6 blocks. 21 points. We've talked about her at length and her impact. So you have Van Lith and you have Prince and you have the role players that you need. That's really all you need to get to this point. That's a phenomenal win. I'm very happy for friend of the podcast, Mark Campbell.
Exactly. I do like you mentioned Agnes Eminopu, and I don't think it can be understated. Like her defense, because she basically guarded all 3 of the Notre Dame big 3 at certain points, right?
Yeah.
Like she was switched on to Citron, she switched on to Miles, she had Hidalgo at times, and then she was in the post versus Liatu King at times. Like she was such a vital part of this defense that forced. I mean, look, 3 of 19, Hannah Hidalgo, 4 of 15, Sonia Citron, 3
Crazy.
of 10, Olivia Miles. Liatu King was the only one that had, a good game with 8 of 9 for 17 points. But Agnes Eminopu, after scoring 20 plus against Louisville, right? She comes in this game and just does it on the other end. Look, we can talk about the game tonight. We'll see how it plays out. How much does that game, the Notre Dame game, scare you for Texas? A little bit, because that was a game that seemingly was looking to exploit everything that we'd seen from TCU this season, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, what happens when Sedona Prince has to guard, Liatu King, somebody who can hang with her? What happens when there's a bunch of guards as opposed to one versus Haley Van Lith? Is that enough? And then they had an answer for it. And so again, I'd probably still pick Texas in this game, But from what we've seen from Texas so far, it hasn't been the team that I would like to say is a national title contender yet. Um, and TCU is playing its best ball of the year, and all the role players that we were worried about are stepping up right when we kind of needed them to.
Texas is deeper than TCU, especially with the
Yes.
aforementioned freshmen that we talked about, and they can rotate their bigs. So,
Right.
they can handle things like foul trouble more. When Notre Dame played Texas earlier this year, Hannah Hidalgo, 11 of 20, 30 points, 3 of 5 from 3.
Mhm.
Olivia Miles, 18 points, 6 of 11 from the field. Citron also 18 points. It was the guards that beat Texas.
Yeah.
That's why in my bracket I had Notre Dame going to the Final Four, because I thought if they
Mhm.
played again, I thought Notre Dame would be able to beat Texas in that way again. Now it changes for me because I do, on one hand, I think, like I said, Texas is bigger. Texas is deeper and can throw more bodies at different players. But at this point in the year, I can't bet against Haley Van Lith and Sedona Prince, because I think, and someone clip it, I think they're the best two players on the floor. I'm no offense to Madison Booker. There's no offense to Rory
Man.
Harmon. No offense to
Mhm.
Taylor Jones. I think they're the best two players on the floor. And I think with their experience, they're old. We can joke about it. They're old,
Mhm.
but they're going to win games in March. And this is their run. And honestly, with the way Mark Campbell has upped their defensive level in the
Mhm.
past month, I struggle to see Texas staying in a a game that could get to 70. If TCU gets to 70, it's over. Honestly, if TCU gets to 65,
Yeah.
I think Texas has trouble keeping to that pace. They're gonna have to hit some shots, right? The freshmen are gonna have to
Mhm.
hit some threes. So I lean TCU here. I think Haley Van
Okay.
Lith actually has if I don't I think Rory's a really good obviously player that can defend the ball, but Haley has obviously faced thousands of those type of players. And
Mhm.
I think Mark Campbell can do enough with the pick and roll actions and whatnot to really get them downhill and get some of their actions open against Texas. So I think
Yeah.
I lean TCU in this game.
Okay. I think for me, it's going to come down to there's two things that if these two things happen, TCU wins this game. One of them is if Eminopu guards, because I presume that she's just going to get Madison Booker. At least for me,
Yeah.
I would basically glue her to Madison Booker
Yes.
the whole game. Um, and I would take my bets on like because Rory's just not looking to score as much this year, and so like I would take my bets with Haley on Rory. I think she could win that matchup defensively. The thing that's going to be is if Eminopu can play Madison Booker to an average game, right? I don't think she's going to stop her. I don't think she's going to be anything like that. But if she can play her to an average game and then maybe have her play facilitator more than scorer, I think that's a plus for TCU. And if Sedona Prince can be the best big on the floor, right? Like that's that TCU she has to be the best big on the floor if TCU's win this game. She can't get out, even if that includes like combining, Oldecker and Jones,
Yeah.
right? Like that, like I'm saying like she has to be the best collective big on the floor. Taylor Jones can't play her to a stalemate. Collectively, Texas can't play her to a stalemate. Like she has to be the dominant presence that I think she can be. But and if those two things happen, I think that Texas wins this game because I don't agree the two best players, but I do think two of the three. I think by far two of the best three are on TCU's team, and one of those, which has probably been playing like the best player on the floor, Haley Van Lith, the past month especially. I think she's going to get hers. I don't think Rory is what she was defensively a year ago. Um,
Yeah.
and I think at the very least, Haley Van Lith's going to have another quote unquote Haley Van Lith game, 25 plus, whatever. And again, it's just going to come down to everybody else around her, right? If Madison Connor can hit a couple threes, I'm not saying she has to score 15, but if she can just be a threat from the outside, yeah, I think it's all up in the air because I don't think it's fair that the only game I saw in person this year was that South Carolina game, right? And so like I always
Yeah.
have that in the back of my head where it's like,
Yeah.
damn, what happens
Thing
if the
is,
role players don't show up? You know?
South Carolina is so different from Texas still. Like
Sure,
I
sure.
think they're just a lot more athletic and versatile. Like Texas is very
Yeah.
stationary, like, and they're obviously great defensively. But the one thing I'll say is this is a battle between two very, very different defenses. Texas forces a lot of turnovers. TCU forces virtually none. Even Notre Dame, in the win over Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame had 5 total turnovers. Like TCU just does not force the turnovers. They just try to get stops and rebound the heck out of the ball, which is fine. And then the other concern I have for TCU is Sedona Prince getting in foul trouble, but at the same time, her personal like her foul rate is pretty low. She is experienced enough to know how not to foul at this point. So I think Texas will try to get her in foul trouble. We'll see if they succeed. But those are the two things. I think Texas will have to force some turnovers. And then if they can get Prince in some foul trouble, that would be huge as well. So definitely a more of a toss-up game than I think I was thinking going in. I thought
I was
going
about to
in,
say,
I
if you'd
think I
asked
said
us
it.
on the start of March, I would have been like, yeah, Texas about like 15 probably. Just
I think
matchup wise, I
we could
thought it was just a mismatch.
we could probably find the clip where I was like, TCU, what did I say? It was like Notre Dame can beat Texas, but TCU can't beat Texas.
Right, yes.
Like
But it was
that
also that we thought that TCU could beat Notre
could be
Dame.
Notre Dame, yes.
It was very I remember that
Triangle.
clip. It was basically saying we picked Notre Dame, but we were saying this is a great matchup for TCU, and then Texas was not a good matchup for TCU.
Correct. Now I've just, after watching Van Lith the past 3 weeks, I'm just like, hey, she's just on a different level right now. So we'll see. All right. That's it. We're not going to talk. We'll have a podcast after next week on all of the transfers, all of the coaching changes.
We've had some coaching changes finally go down. So
So the off-season podcasts are already lining up for April. So we'll get to all those later. But we're going to stay on the basketball right now and continue to talk about this. We'll be back probably tomorrow with a recap for TCU Texas, 6 p.m. tonight on Monday. And then we'll preview both the Final Fours, give our picks, give our breakdown of Houston versus Duke and so on. So stay tuned for that as well. And that's all we got. Thank you all for listening. Leave us a 5-star rating and review on Spotify or Apple. Leave us a like, comment, share, subscribe on YouTube. And we will talk to y'all later.